Welcome back to the deep dive. So if you're one of our learners, you know what it's like out there right now. The signal-to-noise ratio in the world, it feels like it's approaching zero.
It really does. We're in this time that just feels globally turbulent. It's like a deep winter where fundamental trust is just collapsing.
Trust in systems and leadership, even in basic information, it's collapsing daily.
And that creates this internal chaos, right? Where clarity feels less like a goal and, I don't know, more like a luxury you can afford, which is exactly why we pulled the source material for today.
It's a 29-day spiritual manual called the Tevet 5786 Devotional Journal.
Exactly.
So our mission today is pretty specific. We're going to distill the core framework of this journal. We really want to understand the system it's using to train the reader to, well, stabilize their emotions, gain some internal clarity.
And achieve what the author calls disciplined sight.
Discipline sight, right, amid all this global shaking. And just for context, this manual runs for 29 days. It spans from December 21st, 2025 through January 18th, 2026.
And to really get the urgency here, you have to understand the bigger theme the journal sets for the whole Hebrew year, 5786. It's called the Year of the Vav.
Okay, the Vav. And for those who might not be familiar, that's the Hebrew letter that it looks a bit like a nail, right? Or a connector.
It is, and it symbolizes establishment. So if the year before this, 5785, was the year of the window, they call it the hay, time of revelation and seeing new things.
Right, seeing new possibilities.
Then the year of the Vav is when you actually pound the nail in. It's all about securing your foundations, clarifying your specific assignments, and ruthlessly exposing whatever isn't built to last.
So Tevet, this month we're focusing on, is basically the engine for that. It's for achieving that stability and that accuracy.
That's the idea.
So if last year was like getting the architectural plans, this manual is giving you the blueprints and the construction schedule.
Yes, exactly. It's to make sure that the revelation isn't just wasted vision, but that it actually gets secured, that it's permanent.
And I guess establishing a foundation needs absolute accuracy.
It does, and that brings us right to a really critical distinction the journal makes about timing.
They make a very clear choice to follow the lunar-sighted calendar. They deliberately set it against the mathematically calculated one that's often used.
And this is so much more than just a historical preference. It's framed as a spiritual discipline.
Okay, how so?
Well, they explain that the calculated calendar, it just predicts the new moons with a formula, but the lunar-sighted calendar requires actual observation. You have to see the new moon in Jerusalem.
So it forces the user to watch and discern, instead of just, consulting a chart.
Exactly, and that's the whole point. It forces a rhythm of intentionality. You're not just passively following a schedule, you're actively waiting, watching the heavens, and aligning with what you can actually see.
It positions you for what they call prophetic accuracy.
Kingdom timing, yeah. It teaches you to be present and vigilant, which is pretty much the opposite of that rushing, distracted mindset we're all drowning in.
So the simple act of setting the date forces you to slow down. You can't rush it. The next cycle doesn't start until the moon actually appears.
That's it. And the context for Tevet really underscores this need for vigilance. It arrives in deep winter maximum darkness, and it's set against this backdrop of global shaking.
They mentioned the Israel-Gaza conflict, political exposure in the U.S.
Yes, the collapsing trust in systems.
Yeah.
And, that sounds like it could be a trap for distraction and division.
For sure.
But that's what the journal is designed to prevent. The core call isn't political commentary. It's about kingdom intercession. Seeing things not from a fear-based earthly view, but from your heavenly seat in Christ.
And a big part of that is refusing what they call the Ayin Ra.
The Ayin Ra, the evil eye. Yeah.
Which we usually think of as, I don't know, a superstition or something.
But the manual reframes it in a really powerful way. The Ayin Ra isn't a curse someone puts on you. It's a toxic way of seeing. It's a distorted perception.
Rooted in what? Suspicion, cynicism?
Suspicion, bitterness, jealousy. Yeah. It's a lens that actively looks for the darkness and accusation in people and in situations. It makes you a judge of appearances, not a discerner of truth.
Okay, so the first step to establishment is correcting your own lens. And if you refuse that evil eye, what are you choosing instead?
You choose the Ayin Tova, the good eye. And this whole realization that your perception is your greatest asset or your greatest liability, well, that leads right into the 3 pillars of maturity that Tevet is designed to build.
All right, let's unpack that triad. Pillar 1 is the Ayin itself. That's the Hebrew letter for the month, meaning the eye.
Or perception, right. So the whole first movement of this journal is about correcting that perception. Moving from what they call eye perception, seeing everything filtered through yourself, your ego, your
The
offense.
true eye perception.
Yes. Seeing things as God sees them, goodness, truth, the underlying divine order, even when everything looks like chaos. The goal is vision that matures the soul.
And they pair this with the gemstone sapphire.
They do. Sapphire represents that heavenly clarity, that purity of vision. The metaphor that keeps coming up is, you can't build a lasting structure. The vav, the nail-on blurry or polluted vision, clarity is non-negotiable.
So if the first pillar is about sight, the second has to be about applying it. Pillar 2 is the tribe of the month, Dan, which means judge.
And you can see how, given the state of the world they're describing, the temptation is to immediately use that for external condemnation.
To judge everybody else.
Right. But the journal steers you inward. Dan's mandate here is righteous judgment or discernment. It's about bringing internal order and maturity to your own life, your own domain.
So it's self-correction, not pointing the finger. How do they distinguish that from the cynicism of the evil eye?
By its fruit. The Ayin era judges to destroy, Dan judges to produce growth. It's about not judging by just appearances or your emotional reaction, but by the principles of the word and the spirit. You're applying the clarity you got from the eye.
Which brings us to pillar 3, the strategy, the celestial sign, Capricorn.
The mountain climber. It's this persistent figure just ascending steadily. This is the integration pillar. It teaches that this journey of establishment, it requires discipline, strength of purpose, and strategic movement.
So you've got the Ayin for the pure lens, Dan for the discernment, and Capricorn for the strategy and patience. But how do you stop that mountain climber from just acting on impulse?
That is the core conflict, and the solution is found in the daily rhythm they lay out. It's this proprietary 3-part flow that's rooted in the creation order, and it completely flips our typical Western action-first mindset.
Right, this is where it gets really revolutionary for any of us, for the learner who is constantly striving and busy.
The rhythm starts with this. Begin and rest, evening. The biblical day starts at sundown. So you read the devotional, you posture your heart to receive clarity and vision before you take any action.
You're operating from rest, not striving.
Exactly. You let God speak into the darkness of the night to prepare you for the light of the morning.
That just fundamentally changes the nature of what you do the next day. You're starting with instruction, not a to-do list.
That's it. So then you move into the daytime with move in trust. You walk out what was whispered in the night. Your action becomes the fruit of the word you received, not some frantic effort born out of stress.
It leads to calm, spirit-led decisions.
It should. And then the final step closes the loop.
Which is?
End in reflection. Evening. So before the next sunset, you look for God's fingerprints in the day. This restores your faith, it matures your sight, and it confirms the instruction you got. And that rhythm, rest, trust, reflection, that's the mechanism that stabilizes your soul over the 29 days.
I can absolutely see how that would strip away anxiety. So let's look at some specific examples they use to train against those pitfalls, like the impulsiveness that Capricorn warns about.
Well, the classic cautionary tale they bring up is Samson's lesson. That's on day 17. Samson was incredibly powerful. Strength was his gift. But his lack of maturity, his lack of submission to the spirit,
meant that his strength became his greatest vulnerability.
It did. The journal teaches that power without discipline is always a liability. If you're strong, you need holy restraint even more.
That's such a powerful metaphor for anyone who feels highly gifted or responsible in a chaotic world. Your strength has to be steered by discernment.
And that discernment is practiced really intensely on day 10. That day is centered on the critical pause of Aseret Tevet.
It's a fast day, right?
It is. It commemorates the start of the Babylonian siege of Jerusalem. And the significance, according to the journal, is that judgment often starts quietly, like a slow tightening. So this is a day to preemptively judge yourself gently now so you do not fall later.
It's self-correction before the consequence arrives. That's the highest form of maturity. It ties right back to Dan the Judge.
It does. And in a world that's just full of offense, the journal tackles emotional mastery head-on. The concept is be angry and sin not on day 11. Tevet trains you to master your emotions because unsubmitted emotion, well, that's the fastest way to distort your judgment and just forfeit your authority.
Okay, but for the learner who feels things really deeply and is just watching this constant cycle of crisis, how does the manual make that practical? How do you practice emotional mastery day to day?
By reminding you of your true position, what they call the heavenly view. On days 9 and 24, The instruction is to practice being seated in Christ from Ephesians 2:6.
So the mandate is to discern from that heavenly seat.
A place of objective rest, of authority, of truth, rather than just reacting to the earthly turmoil, the fear, the offense. Elevation always comes before clarity and stable judgment.
You can't solve a problem from the level of the problem. That makes perfect sense. So the result of these 29 days, it isn't just a better mood, it's strategic capability.
The final theme is a kind of strategic slowing down. They call it holy restraint and rest as maturity. Day 23 is all about knowing when to say no.
The maturity to understand that limits aren't a loss, they're part of the design.
And that restraint preserves longevity. It's the lesson, that lasting establishment, that Tevet requires patience and knowing when to stop building or even when to stop speaking.
This journey really does seem to move the reader from confusion to clarity. You start by just learning to see on day 1, and you end on day 29 with this sense of being alive, renewal, recovery, and restoration.
And the end goal is that establishment promised by the year of the Vav. The clarity you gain ensures that whatever you build with the Spirit is going to endure. Day 20 talks about the craftsmanship of the Spirit, and it emphasizes that the work you do in Tevet, it prepares the foundation for the entire year ahead.
So you're moving forward, established, aligned, and ready.
That's the goal. It's a really sophisticated 29-day system for internal transformation, and it's all built on the idea that clarity has to come before construction.
It's clear this framework isn't just about surviving chaos, but thriving strategically by gaining control over your own perception and your emotional responses. A true deep dive into self-governance. So look, if you want to go through this 29-day transformation yourself, you really need to grab a copy. Just click the link in the show notes or the description to download the devotional from Shopify right now. It is the best way to start your 2026.
And as we close out this deep dive, maybe consider this. It's a thought that comes directly from the journal's focus on sight and establishment.
Go ahead.
If the light God gives you is only enough for the single step you're on, like it says in Psalm 119, how often is your demand to see the whole path ahead really an act of desiring control, instead of embracing the maturity that comes from just trusting that next single step?
Food for thought. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.